She tore into the janitor in front of heat stammers, mocking him for being a disgrace to the brand, completely unaware that he was the new owner, watching everything. Raymond Ellis parked his pickup across the street from McAllister Motors just before 7:00 a.m. It was still early enough that the parking lot was mostly empty save for a few employees who liked to clock in ahead of schedule. He sat in the driver's seat a minute longer, staring through the windshield at the glassy facade of the dealership. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the fluorescent showroom lights inside were already beaming. He exhaled, grabbed his mop bucket and duffel bag from the passenger side, and stepped out khaki work pants, black non-slip shoes, and a blue maintenance shirt with a stitched name tag that read, Ray, across the chest. He looked like any other janitor in any other city. But Raymond wasn't just any janitor. Not today, just 3 weeks earlier. He'd finalized the purchase of McAllister Motors through an LLC under his holding company. After nearly 30 years in automotive sales, franchising, and commercial real estate, Raymond had decided to revisit the industry. That first gave him a shot, but this time it would be on his terms, and before signing off on any staff changes or structural shifts. He wanted to understand the place firsthand, unfiltered. A few employees nodded at him as he walked in. Through the back, polite but distant. The usual treatment for people in coveralls. Inside, the dealership was already humming. Salespeople unlocking cabinets. Front desk staff reviewing the schedule. A big delivery of SUVs had come in the night before. Still, no one really noticed Raymond. That was the idea by 8:15. The general manager had arrived. Colleen Draper clicked in wearing red heels, navy slacks, and a white blouse tucked so tight it looked like it was stitched in place. Her handbag, black leather, stiff edges slapped against her thigh. As she walked past the reception desk, a few sales reps straightened their postures. Immediately mourning. Miss Draper. One called out. She barely glanced back. Let's have a strong day, people. Raymond was mopping the showroom floor when she passed him for the first time. Her heels stopped just a few feet away. She turned her head slowly and looked him up and down, like he was a puddle in the wrong place. Who cleared maintenance? To be in the showroom during open hours? She asked sharply, projecting her voice, loud enough for 2 customers to glance over. Raymond didn't look up. Just trying to get the floor cleaned. Before it gets busy, try harder, she snapped. You're dragging dirt across our high-gloss tile. That mop water looks like coffee. Are you even using a fresh bucket? He paused, then looked up calmly. Yes, ma'am. Clean water, fresh mop head, Colleen scoffed. This isn't a gas station bathroom. Keep it moving out of sight. Raymond nodded, once turned and kept mopping. Silently toward the side hallway. She shook her head and walked off, muttering something about standards falling. None of the employees said anything. A few glanced away. One of the younger salesmen, a guy named Milo, looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. Raymond wasn't surprised. People don't risk their jobs for the janitor, especially when the boss talks like that. But he caught enough in that moment. The tone, the performance, the way she made sure others heard. This wasn't about a mop. It was about reminding everyone who had power and who didn't. But Raymond wasn't here to fight. Not yet. He was here to watch, to listen. And Colleen had just introduced herself, more clearly than any resume ever could. It didn't take long for Colleen Draper to find her next opportunity. Late that afternoon, just before the lunchtime lull, the dealership was unusually busy. A couple was test driving a new SUV. A young family was seated at the finance desk. An older man stood by the coffee station, flipping through brochures. The showroom floor had the faint sound of upbeat pop music playing through the speakers. And Colleen was at her usual post, center stage near the reception desk, keeping everything and everyone in her line of sight. Raymond was wiping down a display stand in a far corner, trying to keep his presence low-key. His posture was slow, deliberate. He was listening more than anything, soaking in conversation's body language, noticing who avoided eye contact with whom, who flinched when Colleen walked by. Most of them did, but then came the moment. A small child from the young family at finance spilled a cup of juice near the front door. The mom looked embarrassed, searching for paper towels, before she could react. Raymond had already walked over quietly, pulling a towel from his supply cart and kneeling to clean the floor. The child's father, a wiry man in a golf polo, smiled and said, "Thanks, man. Appreciate it." Raymond gave a quick nod. "No problem." Colleen was on her way out of the break room when she saw it, and that was all she needed. "Oh no," she said loudly, walking straight toward him. "You've got to be kidding me." The room didn't go silent, but it shifted, heads turned, conversations paused. Colleen pointed directly at Raymond, as if she were calling out a security breach. "You're wiping the showroom floor in front of customers. On your knees, what is this? A daycare center." She turned to the family at the desk. "I apologize for this, truly. It won't happen again." The mother tried to object. No, he was helping us. But Colleen wasn't listening. "You think this is what we want? New buyers seeing someone crawling around, like a maintenance man from a truck stop." She looked back at Raymond with disgust. "You are making us look cheap." Raymond stood up slowly, towel still in hand. He didn't say a word, just looked at her. She shook her head in disbelief. "Do you even know how much these cars cost? How hard we work to build a luxury experience here? And you're out here like it's amateur hour." Milo, the junior sales guy, took a step forward, hesitating. "Miss Draper, maybe it's not." "Not your turn, Milo." She snapped, eyes still locked on Raymond. "I have no idea who authorized you, but I'm talking to Marcus in facilities. You shouldn't even be on this floor." Raymond, steady as ever, said in a soft voice. "You done?" Colleen blinked, caught off guard by the tone. "I'm here to work, that's what I'm doing," he said plainly. "Clean messes. Keep the floor safe, that's all I've done." She opened her mouth to speak, but didn't the stillness in his eyes unnerved her? Just for a second. Then she gathered herself. "Keep the floor clean then in the service bay, not out here where people actually spend money." She turned on her heel and walked back toward the office corridor. One of the receptionists, Lana, maybe 24, clearly uncomfortable, tried to give Raymond a small smile as he walked past. He didn't return it. He went back to his cart and kept cleaning, one towel at a time, but now the room was different. People were whispering not just about the scene, but about him, the way he stood there, the way he didn't argue something about it, didn't fit the role back in the finance office. The child's father leaned toward his wife. "That guy doesn't look like a janitor." She nodded, "And she looks like trouble." But Colleen didn't care who was watching. She had made her point. What she didn't know was so had Raymond. The break room at McAllister Motors wasn't fancy, just a couple of round tables, a fridge, a microwave. That always smelled faintly of burnt popcorn, and a scratched-up Keurig machine that coughed more than it brewed. Around 1:45 that afternoon, a few employees were catching their breath, between shifts taking bites out of sandwiches and scrolling their phones. Lana, the front desk receptionist, sat next to Milo, the young salesman who hadn't said a word since Colleen's outburst earlier. Across from them was Dana, a finance assistant, who'd been with the dealership for just under a year. She was blunt and didn't sugarcoat much, the kind of woman who always had gum and knew everyone's business. "You saw what happened, right?" Lana asked, voice low but curious. Milo nodded. "Yeah." "Pretty hard to miss. She didn't need to go off like that," Dana said, pulling the foil off her turkey wrap. "He didn't do anything wrong. I mean, she's always like that." Milo muttered, but still. Dude was just cleaning up after a kid. She embarrassed him in front of customers, Lana said twice. Now Dana leaned back and gave them both a look. "Y'all think something's weird about him?" They looked at her. "What do you mean?" Milo asked. "I don't know. He's not acting like a regular janitor. He doesn't flinch, doesn't look confused or lost. Even the way he talks, it's calm. Like he's watching us." Lana hesitated. "You think he's like corporate?" Dana raised her eyebrows. "Wouldn't be the first time someone came in under disguise to see how people act. My cousin works at a resort in Naples. They had a new owner do that last year, pretended to be valet." Milo scoffed. "Yeah. But this is Charlotte, this is a dealership. That doesn't happen here." Dana pointed with her sandwich. "That place changed ownership a few weeks ago. Colleen didn't say much about it, but I heard her snapping at someone in the office about the new buyer keeping a low profile. And get this, they never announced who bought it. Just said it was part of some holding group." Lana blinked. "You think he's the guy?" Dana shrugged. "I don't know. But something's off." Milo leaned back in his chair. He wasn't sure if he bought the theory, but the timing made sense. The way Raymond moved through the building, quiet, observing. There was a confidence that didn't match the uniform. I mean, he did stand up to her. Milo said didn't flinch. Just stared right at her. Dana grinned. And she didn't like that one bit. In the hallway just outside the break room, Raymond had paused for a moment while refilling a cleaning bottle at the utility sink. He could hear bits and pieces of the conversation. Through the cracked door, not every word, but enough to know that whispers had started. The smart ones were beginning to connect dots. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing. He wiped his hands on a towel, looked at his reflection in the utility room's scratched mirror, and gave himself a small, quiet nod out in the showroom. Colleen was on the phone. Her voice was louder than necessary. "As usual, no. I'm not overreacting," she snapped. He was kneeling on the floor, like a janitor from some roadside motel, in the middle of the showroom. Pause. "I don't care if facilities said he's new. He's not trained for customer spaces." Pause. "Yes. I'll talk to HR if I have to, but he doesn't belong up here." She slammed the receiver down. Back in the break room, the conversation had shifted to safer ground. Lana was back on her phone, Milo chewing slowly, and Donna was scrolling through local job listings. Just for fun, but the seed had been planted. And while Colleen clung to her image of control, the room had already started to shift. By the end of his second day at McAllister Motors, Raymond had seen enough to start building a picture, and it wasn't a pretty one. From the outside, the dealership looked polished. The glass windows sparkled, the cars gleamed under LED lights, and the sales staff smiled, like they meant it. But behind the shine was a workplace built on fear, favoritism, and silence. It wasn't just Colleen. It was the way her behavior shaped the whole team. Raymond had watched her throw shade at a receptionist for laughing too loudly near the front. She snapped at a porter for touching a showroom model without gloves, and when a technician from service tried to explain a warranty issue to her, she cut him off mid-sentence and walked away without a word. No one ever pushed back, no one asked questions. People moved around her, like they were avoiding landmines, even the assistant manager. Dean Hollow kept his head down. The man had over a decade of dealership experience, and carried himself like someone who'd once had a voice, but gave it up to survive. Raymond noticed how Dean would quietly fix problems behind Colleen's back, smoothing over things she messed up without ever taking credit. Raymond approached him once during a slow hour. "You've been here long?" he asked, cleaning the edge of the window, where a fingerprint smudged the glass. Dean didn't look up. "Almost 7 years. Seems like you run a tight operation." Dean gave a faint chuckle. "Not my operation." Raymond tilted his head. "Still, you're the one people go to when they need something handled." Dean finally looked at him. "Just a glance, you're not a regular janitor, are you?" Raymond smiled. "Why do you say that?" Dean hesitated. "No offense, just you carry yourself different, like someone who doesn't have to be here." Raymond wiped the cloth on his hand and folded it over the bucket rim. "Maybe I'm just someone who wants to see what goes on when people think no one's watching." Dean nodded slowly, a flicker of something passing behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or relief in the lunch hour that followed. Raymond walked through the service bay, where technicians sweated under hoods and wiped grease off their hands with faded rags. They worked hard, but none of them had been invited to the team building retreat Colleen kept boasting about to the front staff. "You think she even knows our names?" one mechanic mumbled to another. "Only if we mess something up." By mid-afternoon, Raymond passed a conference room, where Colleen was giving an impromptu speech to the floor team. She stood in front of a whiteboard, marker in hand, talking about numbers, quotas, and brand perception. Her words were fast and polished, but her eyes scanned for weakness. Any sign of dissent was met with a warning glance. "Remember," she said, circling a figure on the board, "you're not just selling vehicles, you're selling us. And every interaction is either a reason to trust us or a reason to walk." Milo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Colleen continued, "Perception is everything. And if we're not holding every department to that standard, every department, then we're losing." She didn't mention Raymond by name, but the message was clear. The room felt heavy, not motivated, controlled. Back in the hallway, Raymond leaned against the wall and scribbled something into the small notebook he kept tucked in his pocket. Not numbers, not inventory, just 4 words they work through fear. He closed the notebook. By the end of the day, the floor had been cleaned, the trash bins emptied, and the showroom smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant. Raymond pushed his cart toward the back exit, just as Colleen walked by again. "Let's try not to embarrass us tomorrow." She said. Without slowing down, Raymond didn't reply. Just kept walking head high, eyes forward. But Colleen wasn't watching the right things, and what she failed to see was exactly what Raymond had come for. 3 days later, Colleen was in a great mood. Sales were up. The numbers from last quarter came in strong, and she'd just gotten word that corporate was sending someone to observe operations, which to her translated into a chance to show off. She clicked through the dealership with a rare smile, adjusting the hem of her blazer and touching up her lipstick. Between phone calls, the staff, sensing her improved mood, took a breath of relief. Lana was smiling again. Milo had even cracked a joke in the break room, but it didn't last. At exactly 10 a.m., a Blacktown car pulled up outside the dealership. Colleen stepped out of her office and made her way toward the glass doors. She could see the driver opening the rear passenger door. Out stepped a middle-aged man in a gray tailored suit, polished shoes, and a gold watch that caught the sunlight. Colleen's smile widened. That must be him. But then another figure stepped out from the other side of the vehicle. Raymond, no mop, no utility cart, no janitor uniform. Just a sharp navy suit, crisp white shirt, and eyes that met hers without blinking. She froze for a moment. Her brain tried to rationalize what she was seeing. Maybe he was just dropping something off. Maybe this was a mistake. But the man next to Raymond, the driver in the black suit, spoke first. "Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce Mr. Raymond Ellis, majority owner of Ellis Automotive Holdings, effective immediately. He is now the principal owner of this dealership." You could have heard a pin drop. Someone at the front desk dropped a pen. Milo's coffee nearly tipped off the counter. Colleen blinked. "Excuse me." Raymond stepped forward calmly. "You heard him." Her jaw tightened. "You're what?" He tilted his head slightly. "The janitor." "Yeah. That was me for a few days. Just wanted to see how things ran when nobody was watching." She looked from him to the driver, then to her staff. Most of them were now standing frozen behind desks or leaning out from offices. Every eye was on her. "That's absurd," she said, voice rising. "You can't just pretend to be someone else." "And actually I can," Raymond said, his voice steady. "And I did. The purchase was finalized 3 weeks ago. Through an LLC, yes. Clean and quiet. I've done it before." "But why?" Colleen asked, disbelief bleeding into her tone. "To see who I'm trusting my business with, and to see how the people working under you are treated." He paused. "And I've seen more than enough." Colleen crossed her arms, trying to find solid ground. "You're judging a few days. That's not even close to a full picture." Raymond's smile faded. "You judged me in 30 seconds. A silence settled between them. The staff behind her didn't say a word. Raymond continued. "You humiliated me twice loudly. Not because I made a mistake, but because I didn't look like someone who belonged." Here Colleen's face flushed, but she didn't speak. "And if that's how you treat someone you think can't fight back," he added, "then I have to wonder how you treat the rest of my team. When I'm not around." He turned to the room. "I'm calling a staff meeting in the next hour. Everyone full attendance, including service and detail." Colleen's voice was quiet. Now am I included in that? Raymond looked at her evenly. You'll be addressed. Then he walked away, headed for the conference room. The rest of the staff stood still for a moment longer, then quietly returned to their tasks, exchanging glances, thoughts swirling. In that single moment, the ground had shifted under Colleen Draper's feet, and she was the only one still pretending. Nothing had changed, but the real reckoning was still to come, and no amount of lipstick or spreadsheets could talk her way out of what was next. 45 minutes later, every single employee of McAllister Motors was gathered in the main conference room. Some leaned against the back wall. A few clutched coffees they hadn't had time to finish. Technicians in coveralls stood shoulder to shoulder with finance associates. In business, casual, no one quite knew what to expect, except that something big was happening. Raymond stood at the front of the room, hands clasped in front of him. No notes, no slides, just presence. He scanned the room slowly, meeting eyes one by one first off. He said, "Thanks for being here. I know this wasn't on your schedule." A few heads nodded, no one spoke. "My name is Raymond Ellis. Some of you may know that name. Some of you don't, that's okay. What you need to know is, I've just taken over ownership of this dealership, and I didn't come here to put on a show or swing a hammer." He paused. "I came to listen, and I did." There was a ripple of quiet movement in the room, people shifting, glancing sideways. Raymond continued. "I spent a few days here doing the quiet work, mopping floors, taking out trash, listening to the conversations that happen when people think they're not being watched." His eyes landed briefly on Colleen, who stood stiffly near the corner of the room, arms folded tightly, jaw clenched. "What I heard, what I saw, told me a lot about this place, about who carries weight, about who feels safe speaking up and who doesn't." He let the silence hang there. "I saw employees walking on eggshells, not because of pressure to perform, but because of fear of being singled out, dismissed or humiliated. That's not how you build trust. That's how you drain it." Milo glanced toward Lana. Her arms were crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. Raymond took a step forward. "And I get it. You all need jobs. You've got families, bills, responsibilities. You put your head down and do the work, because that's how you survive. But you shouldn't have to survive your workplace." Someone near the back let out a breath. They didn't realize they were holding. "I'm not here to play hero," Raymond added, "but I will be making changes. The way this place has been run doesn't match what I stand for, and it certainly doesn't match what I expect from leadership." Now his gaze returned to Colleen Miss Draper. She looked up, shoulders tight. "You've been running this dealership for how long?" 5 years, she said, her voice steady but cold. "You've brought in profit, no question. I've seen the numbers. But profit without people means nothing to me. And if your leadership style relies on control through shame, then we've got a problem." A visible shift happened in the room. Someone near the front gave the faintest nod. A whisper moved across the back wall. Colleen opened her mouth. "I've done what I thought was best." "I'm not here to debate," Raymond said, cutting her off politely but firmly. "I'm telling you that your approach doesn't fit here anymore. I'll be reviewing all leadership positions. Over the next 2 weeks, that includes yours." Her mouth tightened, but she didn't speak again. Raymond turned back to the group. This place is about to change. Starting with transparency, fairness, real communication if you have ideas, concerns, issues. I want to hear them not through someone else directly. I'll be setting up time to meet with every department. A tech near the back crossed his arm. Eyes narrowed, not in defiance, but in hope. Raymond let the silence settle again. This isn't about revenge, it's about respect. And that goes both ways. He gave a small nod. Meetings done one by one. People filed out. No one rushed. No one said much. But something had shifted again. This time for real. Shoulders were looser. Heads were higher. Colleen remained in the corner. Staring straight ahead, Raymond didn't look at her again. But she knew this wasn't just about a job. It was about being seen. And now she couldn't hide behind her title anymore. The next morning, McAllister Motors was quieter than usual. Not in the way. That meant fewer customers or slower sales. But in a different, heavier kind of silence. People walked into work, like they were unsure of where they stood. Some exchanged glances, others kept their heads down. Even Colleen, who usually strutted through the building, with the certainty of someone untouchable, walked with slower steps and tighter lips. Raymond had arrived earlier than everyone again. This time, though, he wasn't pushing a mop bucket. He was in the upstairs office suite, the one reserved for ownership, settling into the space that had sat empty for weeks. The door now had a simple plaque that read, R. Ellis. Around 10 a.m. he called for Colleen. She came up, with her arms folded, and her mouth drawn into a neutral line. She didn't sit until he motioned. "This isn't a courtroom," he said. "You can breathe." She gave a short laugh. "Dry and bitter, I suppose. You want my resignation?" "No." He said simply, "I want the truth." That stopped her. "I want to know how things got this way. How you convinced yourself that fear would lead to excellence." Colleen sat back. Her voice came slower now. "More human when I first got here. This place was chaos. Sales were flat. Morale was non-existent. Everyone was too casual. I brought in structure control. And it worked. We became the top-performing branch in the state. But at what cost?" Raymond asked. She didn't answer. "You humiliated your staff. You turned leadership into a performance." He continued. "You confused discipline with dominance. And that made people afraid to speak. That's not leadership, Colleen. That's insecurity dressed up in authority. I was trying to keep things tight." She said, "Keep people focused." "You kept them silent," he corrected. "And they still performed, but not because of you. In spite of you." Colleen's face twitched at that. Raymond leaned back, folding his hands. "You're smart, you're capable. And clearly you know how to move numbers. But what you lack is emotional discipline. That matters more than you think." "So what happens now?" she asked. "You're being placed on leave," he said, effective immediately. "Paid for now. HR will schedule your exit review. You can apply for a position again in 6 months, elsewhere, but here. It's done." She stared at him. Not angry, not even surprised, just hollow. Raymond stood and extended his hand. She looked at it, then shook it without a word. On her way out, she passed Dean, who was waiting just outside the office. He gave her a look, not smug, not pitying, just firm, then walked in after she left. Raymond nodded toward the chair. "Have a seat." Dean sat cautiously. I watched how you handled things this week. Raymond said you clean up after others. Keep the place from falling apart. Behind the curtain, you've got quiet leadership in you. And I respect that Dean said nothing at first. Then you're not like the others. Raymond shook his head. That's the point. They talked for 20 minutes. By the end of it, Dean was offered interim general manager status. Pending a trial period, he accepted. Downstairs, word spread fast. By lunchtime, most of the staff knew Colleen was out. But no one celebrated out loud. It wasn't that kind of place yet. What they did feel was a kind of breath. An inhale they hadn't taken in years. In the service bay, 2 techs bumped fists quietly. In the showroom, Milo cracked a small smile. Told you he wasn't just a janitor. Lana whispered to Dana this might actually turn out okay. But Raymond wasn't interested in making anyone comfortable. Not yet. First came cleanup. Then came trust. And that was going to take more than a new name. On the door. 2 weeks later, things at MC Allister Motors looked the same. On the surface, same logo. Out front, same rows of gleaming sedans. But inside there was a new rhythm. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. The staff still worked hard. Still dealt with difficult customers. Still had long days filled with test drives. Loan applications, oil changes, and paperwork. But something had shifted in the air. People spoke a little more freely. Jokes returned to the break room. Even, the receptionist stopped glancing over her shoulder. Every time she laughed. Raymond had made a point to meet with each department. Individually, then together. Not in conference rooms, with cold air conditioning and rigid agendas, but in workspaces, with sleeves rolled up and phones turned off. He didn't lecture. He listened. Asked questions, took notes. Sometimes. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching how people spoke to one another. And slowly the walls began to come down, on a Friday afternoon as the week wound down. And most employees were gathering near the back lot, for an informal cookout organized by Dean. Raymond stepped up onto a small pallet, stacked with boxes to address the group. No mic, no formality. "All right, everybody," he said, raising his voice just enough. "Just a few words before the burgers are gone." Laughter rolled through the crowd. He scanned the faces in front of him. Some were still unsure, some already hopeful. A few looked downright relieved. "I bought this dealership because I believe places like this matter. Not because they sell cars, but because they run on people. People who show up early, stay late, solve problems, and make customers feel seen. That doesn't happen just because someone's good at their job. It happens when people feel respected." He paused, letting that word settle. And that goes both ways, from top to bottom, from management to maintenance. If respect isn't the foundation, the whole thing cracks. Heads nodded around him. Even the service guys, who rarely spoke up, looked his way. "I'm not perfect. I'll miss things, but I promise I won't stop listening. If something's broken, bring it to me. If you've got a better way of doing things, speak up. You don't need a title to have ideas." Lana glanced at Milo, who smiled just a little. Raymond looked around again, then added one last thing. "The uniform doesn't matter what you drive. Doesn't matter how many zeros are in your account. Doesn't matter the way you treat people. That's what matters." A quiet came over the crowd. Not forced, just real. Dean stepped forward, clapping once. Others followed. Then the sound grew. Not roaring applause, just steady, sincere. As people returned to their food and conversations, Raymond stepped down from the pallet. Dana from finance walked over and handed him a soda. "I got to say," she said, "I didn't think I'd see this place turn around." Raymond smiled. "We're not there yet, but we're pointed in the right direction." He nodded. "That's a start." A few feet away, Milo approached him, a little hesitant. "Mr. Ellis, I just wanted to say thanks. Not just for what happened, but for giving us a shot to be heard." Raymond gave a small smile. "It's Raymond. And you don't need to thank me for something you should have had all along." They shook hands later that evening. As the lot cleared, and the sun dropped low over the city skyline, Raymond stood alone near the edge of the service bay. The mop bucket he once pushed sat tucked in a corner, just where he left it that first day. He looked at it a moment, then turned and walked away. Because respect isn't given once. It's earned again and again in the small choices. And sometimes is the biggest lesson. Doesn't come from power, it comes from staying quiet, long enough to hear what others never say out loud. If this story meant something to you, take a second to think about how you treat the people around you, especially the ones you overlook. And if you believe respect still matters, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that dig deeper than appearances.